Sunny Side Up has been around for a few years. Some of their cases have been hits and some have been misses. This is the brand new Sunny Side Up Shuttle, and it's Sunny Side Up's first foray into an ATX case. Let's see what makes this thing tick. It's pretty interesting and I think you guys might like it. Spoiler alert, I really wanted to dislike it, but I don't. Let's dive in. To get into the Shuttle, there's a little switch on the top of the backside panel. You unlock it and then you slide it back towards you, and then you lift that panel up and away from the case. To take off the TG side panel, there's a little notch on the back edge of the case. Essentially what you want to do is put your fingers into that notch and then kind of pop it and then pull that panel away from the case. This one is a little bit tight because this is an engineering sample, but the retail one will be a little bit nicer. Now, to remove the front panel, you want to put your hand on the edge of that front panel and then pop it and pull it away from the case. And finally, to remove the back panel, there's another notch. This one is a bit tight, as mentioned. Kind of push it and then you can pull that panel away from the case. As for dust filtration, there is a big, massive magnetic dust filter on the back panel. This dust filter is removable quite easily. As well as that, there is a dust filter that runs the whole length of the bottom of the case, and it can be slid out towards the front of the case. And finally, there's another magnetic dust filter on the back side of the case. As for storage, the Shuttle will support two 3.5-inch spinning rust drives on the back of the motherboard tray on this removable bracket. As well as that, you can do two 2.5-inch SSDs on this bottom bracket, which doubles as a cable management cover. For power supply support, the Shuttle supports power supplies up to 190 millimeters in length. As shown, the panel next to the power supply is completely removable and it doubles as a cover for all of the cables. There's more than enough space here, and I'll show this a little bit later on in the video after the build. For fans, there's 3 pre-installed fans. These are reverse pitch fans, so they're not set to exhaust, they're set to intake. And these are all PWM fans as well as addressable RGB. This all plugs into the included RGB controller, which I'll show in a moment. As for fans and radiator, on the back panel, you can do up to 3 120mm fans or a 360mm radiator. It comes out of the case via a single screw. Basically, you can loosen that screw up and then install your radiator or fans outside of the case. The bottom bracket is exactly the same, and you can install 3 120mm fans or a 360mm radiator on the bottom, and on the rear, as shown here, 3 120mm fans. This is kind of external to the case as well. Now, let's take a closer look at cable management. There is, underneath the panel that I mentioned previously, 2 massive Velcro tie downs and some cable routing to help with all of the cable management. There's plenty of other Velcro tie downs all over the backside of the motherboard tray. There's really nice cable routing, and there's plenty of tie downs on the back of the motherboard in general. Speaking of the motherboard, the Shuttle will support ITX up to ATX motherboards, and it has full back connector support, including back connector support for MATX back connector motherboards. This is the Z790 Project Zero, just as a bit of a demonstration so you can see how these boards fit in. For air cooler support, the Shuttle supports air coolers up to 170 millimeters in height. So pretty standard offering for air cooler support. GPU support, on the other hand, is up to 370 millimeters in total. This is one of the biggest GPUs I have, so I wanted to demonstrate just how much space there is. And in the orientation that I'm showing here, this is how the GPU looks. It does have an inverted layout, which I'll show in a moment, but we didn't build the inverted layout. We just built it in the orientation that you're seeing here. There is an integrated GPU support bracket as well. This is in the default location, but if you look closely on the right-hand side next to my hand, there is another place in case you change to the inverted layout for the GPU support as well. For wiring, we've got the front panel connector for all your lights and all your switches, a USB Type A connector, there's a front panel audio connector, as well as a USB Type C cable. For I/O, we've got a USB Type C port, 2 USB Type A ports, and a combined headphone and microphone jack. But you might be asking, where's the power button? Well, there is an integrated RGB controller and the power button is on there. The way this works is this is a complete RGB controller with 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB. It requires SATA power to power it. There is motherboard pass-through for everything as well. And here's a bit of a demo to show you what the RGB controller is capable of. There is quite a few settings here with lighting, and this is one of the best integrated RGB controllers I've seen. There's just so many effects. You can change the brightness, you can change the patterns, you can do so much with this integrated controller without software. A little bit earlier, I mentioned that this case can be put in an inverted layout, and I mean inverted ATX layout, which means the motherboard is the other direction and your graphics card's at the top, not the bottom. Essentially, as shown, you remove the feet and then you can put the feet on the bottom or the back of the case rather, and you can move that I/O to the bottom as well. I didn't do it here because I wasn't planning on building like this, but this is an option if this is something you're looking at doing. But guys, I think that's everything you need to know about the new Sunny Side Up shuttle. Let's do our usual thing. Let's build. We'll test the thermals and I'll let you guys know what I think of this really interesting new case from Sunny Side Up. Let's take a look at the thermals. What you're seeing on your screen right now is the thing that we see quite often with thermals with cases in this kind of design. The thermals are pretty good. However, keep in mind that when the filters are off, the thermals are much better than with them on. I would almost go as far as saying that you could remove this rear filter. I don't think you really need to have the rear filter on there at all, especially if you're liquid cooling. And the bottom filter, I would say, is definitely a requirement. So If you kind of do a little bit of interpolation of the data between having one filter on and no filters on, you can kind of get an idea of where those thermals would lie. But overall, not too bad at all, right? Simple as that. The design of the case is unique enough for it to be interesting thermally, which I like, right? This is not your typical dual chamber case. In fact, it's not your typical fish tank either. It's like a reverse fish tank. Anyway, if you're interested in any of the hardware used in this build, there's a PC part picker list down below. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the Shuttle because, as I mentioned in the intro, this is Sunnyside Up's first kind of dive in. What's the word? It's them delving into ATX cases. And I think this is a pretty interesting first go at it because what this does differently is it hides basically every single cable. Now, I know what you're going to say, hey, this also supports back connector motherboards. It does, but for boards that are not back connector, it does a pretty good job of hiding all the cables anyway. I was really surprised. I was kind of thinking to myself, oh, it's so open, you're just going to see everything, but it's got little plastic covers to cover everything. The cable management is excellent. Take a look at this clip right here. This is me doing the cable management on the back side. I didn't really try. The massive Velcro tie downs basically hold everything in nice and snug. And the cable management is great in this case. Now, I've got to be real with you guys. This is not the retail version of this case. This is an engineering sample, and the build quality of the engineering sample is really good. But Sunnyside Up has said, hey, we're going to make it even better, which is something I can definitely get behind. I really wanted to dislike this case. I'm going to be honest with you guys. There are a few things that kind of annoyed me about this design when I saw it at Computex, but having built in it, I've got to say this is one of the easiest building experiences of the year. And like I said, all the cables are hidden. I hate to say it, Sunnyside Up has done a great job with their first ATX case. And even though it doesn't support eATX, which is, it's almost like a non-issue, this has all of the hallmarks of a company that started out with small form factor cases. This is a trend that we're seeing, guys, and I know I keep banging on about it in all of our case reviews, but we can really see the shift in the way things are being done now. First of all, the power supply has been moved. It is a dual chamber case, but it's kind of like the Geometric Future case that we checked out earlier. The power supply is in a different position, kind of next to the motherboard, which I'm totally fine with. I think it's a good position for it. However, they've done it a little bit differently because this case is kind of flipped on its side. The power connector is just straight on the back of the case. However, this case has multiple layouts. Now, I didn't show the full other layout in this because, to be honest, it's not that interesting. Basically, it's just an inverted upside down layout in a regular ATX layout. So nothing really different from what we see with other cases. The major difference being that we move the feet from the bottom to the back panel, we move the IO to the back panel, we just kind of flip it and it's an inverted layout. Not really my jam, and thermally, probably about the same thermal performance if I'm being honest. We're not going to see too much different with that. So I would say that given that you're not locked into having a single layout, it makes it more attractive. Like I said, it is technically a fish tank with all of the features of a small form factor case with an interesting layout. Now, to answer the question, where does all of the IO plug in? Because often when we do these type of cases, especially with the IO on the top, people are like, how does it work? Well, all of the cables come out on the back side here and they go up and through, and you can pop that top panel off really easily and plug everything in and then route the cables out the back side. So it's pretty easy to do that. Now, you don't have to remove the top panel to plug in all of the IO. There is a removable panel like I showed a little bit earlier in the video. Well, I probably showed it. If I didn't, I'm an idiot, and this is the first time I'm mentioning it. There's a little metal panel that's magnetic that goes on the top, and it gives you access to all of your rear IO, so you don't have to pull that top panel off. However, I would suggest, especially because I built with this and I've used this for a bit now, that if you are wanting to plug in your graphics card, you will probably have to pull off the top panel. Just makes it a little bit easier. Be aware though, some cables, if they're really rigid and they're not as flexible as other HDMI and DisplayPort cables may be an issue with this as well. I did find that I had to bend my HDMI cable that I used for when I do all the testing because it's quite a rigid cable. But other than that, I would say that the Shuttle is really cool. It's really good. I really like it. It's definitely not terrible. I wanted to dislike this case, but I came out feeling pretty happy that although, like I said, I don't like covering these fish tanks, but it's different enough for it to be interesting. Look at that GPU layout with those fans. It just looks so crazy. I know I've been shying away from RGB, but this just looks really good. Now, the biggest question, how much does it cost? Ladies and gents, $140 US, and it's going on sale right now. So if you're interested in picking one up, I'll put links in the description. Obviously, we don't get paid for case reviews, but sometimes I just want to share some links because you guys ask us about it. I'm like, hey, this is the best place to get it, blah, blah. As far as this being available in Australia, I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. The reason why I don't know is our audience is primarily from the US. So yeah, I love Australia, but there's not as many of you gear seekers out here in Australia. Anyways, let us know what you think of the Shuttle. Like I said, I liked it. Very, very cool. It's good to see Sunny Side Up doing something better than their last effort. You remember that one, Claire? Mushroom D, D for disappointment, because that was truly horrific. But this is definitely a step in the right direction. And you know the funniest thing, Sunny Side Up's going to watch this video, and the only thing they're going to take away from the whole video is the fact that I said that the Mushroom D was horrific. It was not a good case. It just wasn't. This one has a lot more thought put into it.